your disposal, I decided that it would be a good thing to speak with this august group of bloggers and make sure that you had a chance to ask me whatever you wished.
Well, let me start then, and first off, thanks for sitting down with us and chatting with all of us here. You're running against Barbara Boxer, and this is a woman who won rather handily the last time out. What do you think is going to be the biggest issue for the primary voters, Republican primary voters here in California, in determining who is going to be the person to stand up against her?
Well, first of all, I am absolutely delighted that I'm about ready to have Carly Fiorina as my opponent. I couldn't ask for a better opponent because she's nationally known and she's very moderate. The more that we found out about who she is, the more this race really reflects or represents a Rockefeller-Reagan redoing, which is exactly what I think we need as a clarifying moment in California politics. So far, I think I'm the only truly movement conservative running for any statewide position in California. I've got a lot of friends who are looking at running or running for office, but no one has actually been engaged as a warrior in the movement as I have for the last 28 years. And what you're going to see is Carly Fiorina, on the very few policy positions we've managed to figure out where she stands. She was in favor of the bailout of Wall Street. She was in favor of the corporate welfare provisions of the stimulus. We saw her on Cavuto on Monday night where she praised Lindsey Graham's falling in with John Kerry on health care and, quote, climate change, which is an interesting dog whistle phrase that she used that indicates that perhaps she understands that there isn't global warming, but certainly the climate's changing all the time, which gives you an excuse for government intervention over just about anything. If you look at these issues, I think that she represents precisely what voters rejected the Republican Party for in 2006 and 2008. And I couldn't be more happy that John Cornyn and the NRSC are backing her, because this is exactly the sort of clarifying moment that we need between the people who are conservatives and are fed up with business as usual in Washington, D.C., and those who just wish to win elections without principle. So that, to me, is the most important aspect of this election. If you extend it philosophically, I saw that there were comments that she made when she attended the Aspen conference in 2001, where she talked about her use of the Hegelian dialectic on a daily basis. And so I kind of see this as a race against the two wings of progressivism, going back 100 years ago, where my primary opponent is Teddy Roosevelt, and my general opponent is Woodrow Wilson. And I couldn't be more happy as someone who believes in freedom and liberty and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So I am just chomping at the bit to get at this primary and thinking that it's going to really raise our name ID. And the preliminary polls, by the way, are looking very good. Fiorina has lost 1/3 of her support among Republicans, according to the Field poll, which is a California organic left of center poll. She's gone from 31 to 21 in the last 6 months. I've gone from 19 to 20, so that now we're neck and neck. And the polls between us and Boxer are within the statistical error, showing the NRSC and anyone else who cares to see that a moderate female polls no better against Boxer than a conservative male. Kind of blows up that narrative, doesn't it? Yep. So, yes.
And this is just a quick follow-up. This is the same sort of thing that we kind of saw in Pennsylvania with Toomey, and when Toomey wanted to get into the race, this is before, obviously, Arlen Specter switched parties. But I mean, this was the same sort of thing, I think, that you saw where people were trying to discourage Pat Toomey from running, and now I'm certain thrilled that he didn't take them up on their advice.
Right, absolutely. And I think in this case, again, people who are in D.C. have a very different view of the world than what ground truth is, especially in a place as far away as California, where people look at California and just assume that we're this liberal state, and they don't look a little deeper and see that California was the state that reaffirmed traditional marriage by a 5-point spread, 52.5 to 47.5. That California was a state that rejected the continuation of the largest tax increase at the state level in U.S. history on May 19th by almost 2 to 1. and measure by the way that I was one of only 3 Republicans on the floor of the Assembly to vote against, the only one to argue against. I resigned as chief Republican whip in protest over it. I tried to take out the Republican leader, didn't even get a second, but I formed a group to stop it, VoteNo6times.com, and spoke extensively around the state against it. Was told by the leadership at the time that I was a fool, that they had all the special interest groups bought off, and my rejoinder was, you forgot the most important special interest group of all in the state, the voters. And it ended up losing almost 2 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at those sorts of moments in time, you realize that California is not as uniformly liberal as the establishment would like you to believe that it is. Yes, sir.
Question, one of the things that I'm sure will come out in the primary is Carly has spent her career as a successful businesswoman. How do you compare that to your resume?
Well, let's look at it. Of course, it doesn't take me to answer. Look at what the Democrats and Barbara Boxer in the press has already said. She was, for 5 years or so, the chairman and CEO of Hewlett-Packard, was fired by the board. It was part of the McCain campaign where she was the chief economic advisor and was let go by the McCain campaign for a series of gaffes. And oh, by the way, if she was the key economic advisor, did she advise him to go with the bailout of Wall Street? Because if she did, that was the turning point that caused him to lose the campaign. If she didn't, what kind of pull did she have as an advisor? So now, my own career, I was 13 years in aerospace. I left the company that I worked for as vice president for research. Had a successful enough career that I get paid significantly less today as a lawmaker than I did in the private sector, much to Mrs. DeVore's chagrin. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Retired Reserve. I held a top secret clearance for over 24 years. I'm an intelligence officer. I was the youngest Reagan White House appointee in the Pentagon from 1986 to 1988, where I was a Sched C appointment for Cap Weinberger. I was a special assistant for foreign affairs. I was Congressman Chris Cox's first staffer and helped him staff up his office. I was a commissioner for 6 years in the city of Irvine. I was on the Central Committee for 10 years. Traveled extensively over the world. Pardon me? Mrs. DeVore would say that I do windows, perhaps not as much as she would like me to do. I do mow my own lawn and do my own yard work, which my neighbors would attest to, because my yard probably doesn't look as good as theirs, but and do all my own fix-it work, because when I was, before I won my Army scholarship to let me go to Claremont McKenna College, I was actually a dues-paying member of the FFL-CIO, where I worked with steel, so I still know how to build things with my hands, as my wife will tell you with all the home improvement projects that I've done myself around the house. But it's a good way to get your mind off of politics. So if you look at her record, look, I've never missed an election. She's voted 6 times in the last 25 years, according to press accounts. 6 times of, I think, 16 elections in California going back to 2000, and not at all in New Jersey and in Maryland from 1989 to 1999. Not at all. And I would say that when you're running for one of the highest offices in the state of California, first of all, look at history. How many times have we elected a non-celebrity self-funder to the top office in the state in our history? Not once. Never. Look at Al Checky. Look at Ed Schau. Look at Michael Huffington. Look at Jane Harmon. The list goes on. In the case of Huffington and Harmon and Schau, they all had like 1 or 2 terms of Congress, but it wasn't really enough to really give them a body of public work, a body of public information that let you knew kind of where they were coming from, or gave the public an understanding that this was someone that you could rely on, or you knew where they were coming from. So I think she's going to have a very hard time winning the primary. And partially, by the way, because Barbara Boxer and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee view her as a more formidable candidate, because in their mind, they think a moderate woman who might self-fund is more formidable than a conservative man from Orange County. Now, the polls would indicate that perhaps they're wrong, but who am I to disabuse them of this contention? Because if you look at their history, look at what, for example, Gray Davis and the Democrats did in their intervention in the Reardon